Hi,
Hi, Julie.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I've got the watery eyes again, which is driving me crackers. Makes my eye look really sore. But apart from that,
Yeah,
anyway, that's
I don't
that's
miss that. But that's another episode.
all these side effects is brilliant. But yeah, this is our second recording that we've done talking about our cancer stories. And I know today we're both really keen to talk about children and how cancer affects our children and how we navigate cancer with children. I think it's one of those things that there's no right or wrong. Everyone's going to be different, every situation and every child and family is going to be different. But yeah, I'd love to hear your story on how you navigated it with your children.
Yeah. I guess there was two different sides to it. There was a bit of a debate wasn't a debate, it was a discussion that I had with my husband about, yeah, so how do we break it to them? Do we break it to them? Do we use the word cancer? And then there was another conversation around treatment because I guess there's this concept about cancer, and for our children at the time, they'd not long lost it was my uncle to pancreatic cancer, maybe a couple of years or maybe even a year before. So it was still new-ish for the children to get their head around what cancer meant. But because they'd heard it, I was really adamant I didn't want to worry them because that
Yeah.
was their first introduction to the word cancer, and it took somebody from our family. Also, I think there is a healthy discussion to be had around what families share with their children. And you've already touched on it that it is a very personal thing, whether or not families choose to share everything or some things or nothing at all. It was that kind of a conversation that we had because for me, I'm a bit more of a wears my heart on my sleeve a person, open book, whereas my husband really isn't like that. So we had to navigate what our own opinions were about what to share with the children and how to manage that. And obviously, we have two children, and at the time they were 4 and 6. Being age appropriate, I think, obviously, is another thing, thinking about what actually can they understand. I just, before we started recording this, I thought I'm just going to have a quick chat with my husband, see if he can remember, because to be honest, I remember quite maybe a year after these conversations, I remember talking about it quite often because it was significant to me. But then when I was thinking about it this morning, it was just a bit fuzzy. Like I remember some details, but I used to remember telling this story about how we broke the news to the kids. Whereas now, I don't think it's repressed, but it's almost like just time has passed and maybe it's not so traumatic for me, that whole memory. I can see that the kids have moved on in a way that's healthy, I think. But yeah, so we did go down the line of we wanted to tell the kids about me being poorly. We had something around I had a poorly boobie and it was really not good. It had to go, so I had to have surgery. My son, I mean, he was just like, "Oh, okay then. Where's my iPad?" And just off he pops. My daughter, she was a little bit more curious and worried. She needed a lot more reassurance for sure. They're both sensitive, but I would say Ed is a bit more present, I suppose, in the moment where,
Yeah.
which you probably would imagine for someone a bit younger, whereas Livy is particularly more reflective, I would say, as a person
Yeah.
anyway. So she did have that. I remember after my treatment started, again, we had to have a conversation having chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Mum is going to might look a little bit different. Her hair's probably going to fall out. She might spend a bit more time in bed, not be able to be as physical, playing and running around and things like that. Just some of the things to expect, but not
Mm.
giving too much detail. But yeah, just a bit of a, yeah, it might be like this. And my husband and I decided that we wanted to give her a safe space, that if she wanted to have conversations, it didn't have to be with me, because I think there was a worry there that she couldn't talk about me, but she wanted to. And I remember on a in the evening, she would open up to Tom, her husband, and she would say that that was like her check. They made it like a check-in time,
Oh,
you know.
lovely.
So she had that space where, because you could see, like there were times when I remember Livy would be looking at me, and it would be a worry, but she couldn't
Mm.
say anything for some reason, and obviously she was scared. I remember, and this is a memory that I do keep, is the one where their bedroom was above ours at the time, and she used to ask Tom a lot, is mummy gonna die? And it was just heartbreaking to think that someone so young, it's just hard enough when you're thinking about it as an adult, but a kid, a child having those thoughts and wanting reassurance on a regular basis. And I was listening, and as breaking it as it was for me at the time, and I still think it's so bloody horrible that kids have got to go through this. I'm grateful that she could say it. She could
Yeah.
actually share that with Tom and get reassurance from Tom.
Yeah.
And there was no, we did reassure her as much as I might have been worried, because
Yeah.
we haven't got the crystal ball. And that is the big worry. We were really firm to say, no, I'm not going anywhere. This is a medicine that's going to keep me here. And that's why it's really important that I take it. And yeah, it's really horrible, but it will let mummy live and we'll be fine. And then we'll be, doing all the things that not we normally do. Yeah, that's my story in a nutshell
Yeah.
regarding telling them.
And I think it's really, I mean, first of all, the fact that you and Tom were on the same page, I think that
Mm,
can be a whole process in itself, isn't it? Because we're all different.
yeah,
We might all have different opinions, but it sounds
yeah,
like you broke it down for them and you told them about the diagnosis and gave them a little bit of time with that before they then give them details about the
mm,
next step treatment. But
yeah,
it sounds like you gave your kids that safe space that it can be
mm,
talked about because I think not just as children, but as adults, like our imaginations are incredible. And sometimes, if we don't have all the details, our imagination can create this really extravagant picture that, can
absolutely.
often be even worse than the reality. I'm really passionate about this, but for children to be able to share how they're feeling or what thoughts are going through their head, I think it's so beneficial for their well-being and
Mm,
to have that space.
absolutely.
And I was smiling when you said that because I've just dug out some notes actually from when we talked to the boys about it, and I put on there tell the boys it's okay for them to talk to other people about this because they might not want to come to me or even Steve. They might want to go to somebody that's outside of the family or somebody that's
Yeah,
close but not us. And
yeah,
yeah, we thought that too, that actually it's really important that they know to be able to share it with somebody. It doesn't matter if it's us or not. It's really important.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I know, I think I remember hearing from one of the teachers that they'd said, I think it might have been Eddie, he did, yeah, so he spoke to one of his teachers, and I remember the teacher coming to speak to me about it later. And it wasn't a big thing. There wasn't a breakdown or anything at the time. But even if there had have been, like, I'd have just been pleased that he was having that conversation. And I
Yeah.
know it is worrying for parents out there if they're thinking, oh my God, they're talking about it to other people. It means they can't talk to me. I know it's hard as parents because you want to be that person for your kids all the time. And it is hard to realize that sometimes when you're going through something like this, it might not necessarily be the person for them at the time because they're just at a loss. They're trying to make sense of things and everything's changing. And we talk about periods of transition for children being difficult for adults and children to understand. I'm not sure where my safe space is anymore because mum or dad is sick and
Mm.
my dad or mum is concerned with them, and I'm not sure if this is okay. Do I want to occupy them with this thing that I'm worried about? Kids might have those kinds of worries, but I also know if any worries are shut down for children, or if they feel like they haven't got a safe space, like it's sad to see. You
Yeah.
can see that it can sometimes not come out well if children
Mm.
are not finding that space to share how they're thinking and feeling. Yeah, I think we were pretty lucky that we had that. I think Olivia was a bit more clear with what her worries were. Specifically, it was about me. Eddie, I noticed, had a lot more stomach aches and headaches, and he wanted to be with me a bit more physically. So he'd look at me and say, "Do you want to watch telly, mummy?" And he might not necessarily want to watch telly because Eddie's a little bit more physical, to be fair. He'd rather play football outside or have a Nerf war. But I remember his checking in and his kind of empathy or sympathy at the time was it was like mimicking my symptoms. I felt that was his thing. He was being aware of it. So we would talk about our poorly tummies together and say it only lasts a day and we'll be fine. So that's his kind of empathy at the time. And that's changed. He was 4. That's
Mm.
just so young.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, but now it's just more about I don't know. At the moment, I'm not having masses of side effects on different things. It's just I guess for me, it's just always going to be the worry of recurrence. It's that sensitivity to things changing
Mm.
and going to hospital appointments for different things. Like at the moment, I'm looking at reconstruction surgery. And so I'm going to a lot of doctors for appointments. So I noticed that Livy might be a little bit more aware and saying, "Oh, what are you going to the doctors for again? Is that another
Mm.
appointment, mummy, again?" Just thinking about after cancer, after the active treatment, like
Yeah,
what happens then for the children.
yeah.
And so I'm not 100% sure if me and Tom were just talking about it, thinking, did this thing about cancer kickstart this idea that children can worry? They can start this process of worrying. If I hadn't had cancer, would Livy be a worrier now? Would she have turned out to be as sensitive? Or would she have had that anyway? Or it might have come along later? Because even now, she might look at me and say, "Mummy, are you okay?" And I might just be tired, or it might be because she's been naughty and she's just checking, am I in trouble? And just to hear her say it, she's 9 now, and the way she says it is genuine. She's really curious. And I do wonder sometimes, have I ruined that for her? Have I put that in her head so soon?
Mm.
This ability to worry. Maybe it happened anyway, but later. I don't know. I don't know.
It's so hard. I think, like, parenting in general, we always look to ourselves and think, oh, what have I done wrong? Or what did I do to
Mm,
cause this? And we are really hard on ourselves, I think, aren't we, as parents? And I think for me, when I first got diagnosed and was facing the fact that I had to tell my children about this, I was really angry because I was like, this isn't fair on them. This hurt and pain that it's going to cause them is not fair. And I was really angry. But then over time, it wasn't straight away, but over time, it made me see that actually I was giving them an opportunity to face the rubbish that life throws at us sometimes, and to be able to build up some resilience and to learn how to navigate things as a family together, and that anything can be faced. As
mm,
scary, as horrible, and unfair as it is, actually, we can face these things. And I think you talking about your children being able to share that
mm,
is huge. I think that's a good thing that perhaps can come out of this is that we can help our children to see that they can share their feelings. And sometimes they don't even know themselves what's going around their heads or how they're feeling, but to be able to just say, oh, I've got tummy ache, or I'm feeling this, or I've been thinking that, can help them as well to
mm.
figure out where they're at
Yeah,
and what they're feeling.
yeah, yeah. It's a learning opportunity, isn't it? And it sounds so, I don't know, I've got like I don't know, it feels like it's such at odds, isn't it, with the idea that it's just so rubbish. And like you say, it's so unfair that the children have
Mm.
to go through this and then
Mm.
to try and find this silver lining in this cloud. Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you've just got to manage as you're going through it. So you don't know,
Yeah.
you don't know how they're going to react, or you don't know what's going to come up in the future or what they're
Mm,
going to be thinking. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because you're having
mm.
to learn as you go along, and it's a big thing to learn to navigate.
Oh
Um,
God, yeah.
but
Mm,
I think it's really important to say that there is no right or wrong way to do it. There's no right or wrong way about whether a family decide to share it with their children or not, because it will all depend on your own circumstances and situations, and where
mm.
your children at, ages as well. I know your children were a little bit younger than mine when
Mm.
I was diagnosed, and it's taking all that into account, isn't it? And
Yeah.
having faith that the decision you make is right for you and your children, which
Yeah,
again is
yeah, exactly. Once you jump in and you say, okay, this is how we're handling it,
Mm.
you gotta go for it. And yeah,
And
definitely.
it's funny because it's something that I knew straight away. Like as soon as I got my diagnosis, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had to tell the boys and I had to use the word cancer. It was so clear to me. And that's not
Mm.
like me. Being a Libra, I'm usually sitting on the fence and can't make a decision to save myself. But this I knew. And thankfully, me and Steve had a lot of conversations, like I'm sure you and Tom did, about how do we tell them? What do we say? What words do we say? And then trying to preempt any worries or questions from them as well. And it seems funny, but when we got the diagnosis, we literally walked out of the doors of the breast unit and then into the doors of the Macmillan Information Centre, just in a bit of a daze of, okay, we've just had this news and we need to tell our children. It was that quick. And they were absolutely amazing. They gave us so much information. They reassured us that there's no right or wrong way to do it or whether we do it or not. But they also
Mm.
gave us so much like leaflets and sites and support that we could go to. And there are
Mm.
conversations out there about how to talk to children and what to say. So we obviously knew that we wanted to say the word cancer. And similar to you, we'd had a death in the family from cancer a few years before this. So we knew as soon as they heard the word, their minds would connect to the only experience that they've had with cancer. So that was something we had to make sure we reassured them it's a different cancer, it's in
Mm.
a different place. Um, so my treatment, I mean, straight away they were talking about surgery. So I knew that within a couple of months I'd be going for surgery, I'd be having an operation. And that was the information that we gave them at that time. And it, like you say, it's about age appropriate. So, what can they
Mm.
understand? And I think what really helped me as well is reading through the books. We got this book from Winston's Wish, The Big
Okay.
Sick, about how to talk to children. But just reading through that and how they explain that cancer is basically just your cells going AWOL and they're misbehaving made me
Yes.
think, yeah, everyone's scared of the word cancer and saying the
Mm.
word, and it's like this big monster that's coming to attack you, where actually it's just your own body just going a bit wrong.
Yeah.
And to explain that to the children helped me to see it differently as well. Actually, it's not something that's attacking me, it's something that's just going a bit wrong within my own body. And yeah, our children reacted very different. So Finley, very empathic, and he got upset straight away and he would ask questions. So we actually created something called a worry jar. So we had decorated a little jar, left it in the living room, and if they had anything that they were worried about or something they wanted to ask but they couldn't say the words, they could just write it down and pop it in the jar and we could read it.
Oh,
So we did that, and then Rafe was a bit younger, and he reacted very differently. I think one of the first things he said was how embarrassed he was going to be at me walking up the road with just one boob. So I was like, so that's where you're coming from. It helped us to put it in perspective, isn't that parenting? It's like you can expect everything except what's actually thrown at you from one day to
yeah. That's just such a curveball, isn't it? How is he even thinking about that?
that's one thing we didn't expect to come up and we didn't have an answer for. But it just made us laugh. Bless him.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's hard. I think one of the hardest things was them seeing me looking ill when I started to lose my hair, when I lost my eyelashes and eyebrows, and I just looked very different. I think that was
Mm.
quite hard for them as well. And just trying to keep those conversations open. I think for us going through it, it's going to be there forever, isn't it? It's never going to leave us that thought, and obviously the ongoing treatment as well, medication and
Mm.
checks, and it's always just going to be there. And I feel like it's going to be, as a family, it's just going to be there in the background. So it's important, like you said, that Liv had with Tom, is just having those check-ins and just
Mm.
seeing where they're at, if there's anything
Mm.
that they want to talk about.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
but
How
yeah,
are the
having
boys now? How are they? Do you think it's
yeah, they're again very different. It's hard because you can't just go through it in one way. You've got to almost go through it in two ways because they're both very different, need different things and different approaches. But yeah, they're fine. I think it's hard to tell, isn't it? But I think Finley being that bit older, he's 13 now, and he'll ask questions if he feels that he needs to or he wants to. Rafe doesn't seem he doesn't seem concerned. It's one of those things, isn't it? You don't know what's going on inside their heads. But
yeah.
yeah, he's happy to have a laugh about things. We went swimming last week. I've got my swimming prosthetic that I put in my swimming costume. And I came home to put the washing on and I couldn't find it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've left it in the cubicle. Someone's going to come along and find that. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, boys, I've done something really bad. I was like, I think I've left my swimming boob at the swimming baths. And Rafe was like, Mom, is it that Luna's got? And the puppy's got it out of my swimming bag and she's
No,
running around with it. I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like,
brilliant.
at least I didn't leave it in the swimming baths anyway. These things that you
I,
just don't expect.
no, that's it though, isn't it? It's just being like it's a normal thing. It's not hiding
Yeah.
it. It's and again, it's so personal. But the idea that the kids know you've got a swimming boob, it's no big deal. You're like, oh, that's our private thing when you're getting
Yeah.
changed. But I mean, I remember Eddie seeing me in the shower once and saying, "Mummy, is your boobie going to grow back one day?" And just like a normal kind of, no, it's just having to explain a little bit about my body. But
Yeah.
again, it's took time to get to that place. But I feel like for the benefit of my kids, knowing that it's no big deal. I think for us to move to a place that's okay, this is our new normal. Yes, my body looks
Yeah.
different, and but it's okay.
Yeah.
The
Just
dog
a
getting
normal
your boob
conversation.
out. This is just family life. This is our family.
It's real, isn't it? This is the reality.
It's so real.
But it's like you wouldn't have necessarily thought that would be going through,
Mm,
your kid's mind, actually. Is it going to grow back? Kids see things from a different perspective, don't they? And I don't know about
mm,
you, but I feel that sometimes we don't give them enough credit for being able to manage things. I think almost for me, from my adult perspective, I was expecting all these different things to come up for them when actually they haven't had the experiences that I've had going through life. Obviously, the so many more years that I've been on this planet than them.
mm,
But actually giving them information, being straight, saying the words, and like
mm,
you say, just having these are just normal conversations for our family. I think they they asked the questions that they needed to. They got the information that they needed to that they could handle at that age. And I'm hoping that they're getting through it okay and it's building some resilience. And yes, it's
mm.
hard, but hard things happen in life. And we can face it, we can get through it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. No, it's
It's
true.
definitely one part of parenting that I never put into the plan, never expected to be navigating this kind of thing. But then, isn't that life? You don't know what's going to come up and what you're going to
Mm.
have to manage. Yeah, it's just learning as you go along, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It always is, whether it's learning to potty train or it's learning to go from solids, milk to solids, or navigating this. It's always something to navigate. And I think, yes, it's a big topic. Of course it is. But how you can help your children go through it is to try and see it with that kind of familiarity of what kind of language you use, the tone, and being just familiar with your kids to give them the reassurance that our families, yes, we're going to go through this thing that's really difficult, but I'm still mum, you're still mum,
Mm.
this is dad. We can still have these conversations and encouraging that. I think there's not much more we can do, trying to strive for perfection and get it right every time. That's the whole conversation about parenting, full
Yeah.
stop, is being the good enough parent. Of course, we're
Yeah.
going to be the good enough parent. We're trying, love them to bits, and
Yeah.
they still do the things that children do. And we're navigating this challenging situation, just doing our best.
Yeah,
Keep doing it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And that terminology, being able to say the words as well. And I had to learn myself to be able to say the words and speak the words and tell other people before I could even
Yes.
get comfortable saying it to the boys. But yeah, I
Mm.
think if we don't use the words, it makes it seem even more scary, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
Um,
like Voldemort, isn't it? I just think about.
yeah.
I know it makes that sound really silly, but it just. But it's like
That's
if you
yeah,
don't,
that's a really good way to put it.
you can't say
Yeah.
his name because we're so scared of him. But
Yeah.
actually, I'm not scared of him, and it's what Harry starts, isn't it? Like I'm not going to
Yeah.
be scared of saying his name.
Yeah.
So, but
And I
yeah,
think one thing
it's
that stuck in
yeah,
my head as well is just that I didn't want them to hear it from someone else or hear it in hushed
mm,
whispers in the kitchen, because that for me made me feel like if we don't tell them and they
mm,
find out, we've kept it from them. So A, it's going to be really bad, really scary, but also if we haven't spoke to them about it, they can't speak to us about it. So
it's a
it was
trust
trying
thing.
to, yeah, make sure that there was that open conversation and that channel of communication between us
Mm,
and being okay to say it. And to be honest, I think if there's anything that if there was some sign that said you've done the right thing, a couple of weeks after we told the boys, I had a letter come through from the hospital and Rafe opened it and he's never done this before, but this day decided to open my letter and it was an appointment and it said the word cancer on it. So we found Finley and Rafe over this letter, reading this letter, and I thought if they didn't know and they suddenly opened this letter and read
mm.
it, the thought of what would have gone through their heads and how we could have
Oh yeah.
back from that. And I thought, yeah, it's not nice that, they're going through
Mm,
this. They've read
mm,
what they read in the letter, but I thought at
mm,
least they know there's no secrets
mm,
there. And it has helped. I don't know about you, but when we're having conversations
mm.
with friends or other family members, and they're asking how I'm doing, how treatment is, and all of that. It's nice to be able to talk and not be like, oh my gosh, is someone going to say something and they'll hear?
They're
Um,
familiar. Yeah, they're
yeah,
comfortable. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
We all
they
know
hear that,
it's made a big difference.
yeah, kids hear a lot more than we give them
Oh
credit for,
God, radar tab. Yeah, they're
except
really
when
good
you're
at
asking
that.
them to bring their pots in or go and get dressed for school. It's a whole different hearing, isn't it?
Just a bit, just a bit. I feel like we could talk about this and more, as always, but I'm mindful of the time. So obviously, I'm so grateful that we get to have these chats,
Yeah, me
and I look forward to more,
too.
basically.
Yeah. I really appreciate like your openness and honesty and being able to talk so candidly about this. And it makes me feel less alone. I'm not the only person that's been through a similar
Exactly.
experience with younger children, similar
Mm,
age. Yeah,
mm,
it's so nice. So yeah, I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for
thank
sharing that.
you. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Yes. See you soon.